Let's get going. We are going to start with a panel that puts everything in context, I hope. We're going to start with a panel called Beyond the Hype. Where does the true future of the metaverse lie? And I'm going to be your moderator, and I'm going to stay up here. So we've got our panel here, and I can see we've got Jean-Philippe on Zoom. Hi, there you go. So, and I think, folks, you can see him down there. So we're all together. I'm going to introduce the panel, and then we're going to get going. We've got a little under an hour to do this panel, and towards the end, I'm going to invite people to ask questions. Please do put your hands up, and I'll come to you, but I've got plenty to get us started. So first of all, let me introduce our guests here. We have Adam Starcaster from Starcaster Games, Jean-Philippe Steinmetz from Accelerate XR, who's on screen. We have Nav Gupta from Chaarmi Worlds, Nimrod Shanit from Holy City VR, and Steeve Huin from Irdeto. Now, I'm going to let them introduce themselves in more detail now. So first of all, folks, and we'll start at this end with Nimrod and work our way down, please introduce yourself to our audience here and your company in a few words. What's your background?
Hello, good morning. I'm originally a photojournalist, transitioned to filmmaking, transitioned into XR making. We, for the past 7 years, have produced a number of experiences in virtual reality, augmented reality, and extended reality. And most recently, we've transitioned into gaming as well, since mostly XR is a kind of a liminal space where you can enjoy and see different worlds, but when you're in these worlds without having any interactions, it gets kind of boring. So at first we've tried incorporating these volumetric videos, introduced 360 stereo videos into these liminal spaces, and then realized that instead of just moving around from space to space, we should introduce a gamification element. And we started going into games and games design. And now we've kind of reached the point where we're doing both biometric introductions, so using biometric sensors in the headsets when you're using these HP Omnicept headsets for now. There's more coming out, but you can actually get the heart rate of the players, you can get their pupillarity, you can get the cognitive load, and you can actually create a game that uses this information and inferences to evolve, if you like. We're also using procedurally generated assets, if you like, to create a maze in what everybody will start kind of creeping out about, which is a kind of a metaverse, mini metaverse, because it connects different heritage locations worldwide through these maze of tunnels. And we're also creating a mixed reality experience on board a huge plane that is a rebuilt model of a full-scale 1929 plane, the first commercial airline that flew from Germany to North America in 1929. So you're boarding the plane and playing on board the plane as a crew member. So these are just part of the games we're into. Maybe just to mention one other experience that we're doing that is really exciting with the support of NASA, that is deals with how to mitigate social isolation during space travel. Because what's interesting is when astronauts kind of go long missions, as the one planned going to Mars, there's a 3 years disconnect from their families. So how do you mitigate that? So we're setting a drama, a family drama in this kind of context, where you as a player are taking the role of one of the family members and can engage in free dialogue using natural language processors to connect to the NPCs in the game. And the game branches according to what you say.
I'm going to stop you there because we're going to run out of time. No, that's good because you've raised so many points there that we can come back to and things that you're working on that I know everyone will want to chip into. So let's go down to Nav, and can you introduce yourself as well? And
Sure. Thanks for that. My name is Nav Gupta from Chaarmi Worlds, Inc. We are building the WordPress of metaverse creation using our technology, throw it on any web server, click a button, and you get a full metaverse galaxy up and running from a simple 4-wall garden all the way to a fully decentralized blockchain-enabled galaxy. We're starting off at $1,000 a month. We're looking at business owners right now who want to get into the space and even doing custom work for them. It's exciting times ahead. We want to keep life easy. My background is from Unity 3D. I was a Unity Live help expert there, and we saw an opportunity to get into the metaverse, and we said, hey, we make this technology. Let's go all in. We just started this March, and yeah, exciting times ahead. So there we go. That's a bit about me.
No, that's great. Thank you, David. Again, we'll come back to talking about the metaverses you're creating there. Adam, do you want to leap in there and explain what you're about?
So I'm Adam at Starcaster Games. We are a coalition of former AAA veterans in the game industry and new explorers alike, working on trying to make it a safer space for content creators. And that's simplified.
That's great, thank you. And let's do Steve. Yeah, what's your background?
Hi, everybody. So my background is in cybersecurity. And specifically in this context, today hopefully we'll talk a little bit about what are the security concerns and considerations in the metaverse.
I think that's good. That's definitely a topic we'll come back to. And of course, Jean-Philippe on screen. Tell us your background, what you're working on, and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jean-Philippe. I basically am a former AAA engineer who created a company to basically dramatically reduce the operating costs, development costs, and time to market of making massive multiplayer experiences. Basically, my team and I have been building backends and online networking technology for various game companies, big titles, over the last few decades, and we decided to basically create a low-code platform that makes it easy for developers to basically get up and running in a matter of days instead of months and years, and that has led us into essentially the metaverse, where we are now forging new ground into gaming adjacent and entertainment in general, and obviously and breaking down barriers of what that entails.
That's great. Thank you, Jean-Philippe. So that's everyone and what everyone's working on. Really appreciate you coming here today to share your experience with the audience. So let's dive right in. I want to see where you guys take this conversation. Before we get going, do you think everyone here understands what a metaverse is? That's the panel we're on. There's so many different aspects. Everything that you guys have all said has touched on a different aspect of what we're talking about here. Let's just start with the one to set this the first talk of the day. We're here on the Mapping the Metaverse panel. I think I know what a metaverse is, but let's get started. What are we actually talking about here, and how do all your visions differ from each other? Nav, do you want to dive in? What is the metaverse?
That's a good question. You guys can hear me, right? Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. The answer is we really don't know, in my opinion. It's being built by all of us, actually. What's about to come and what it's going to be 20 years out, that's really up to all of us. My vision is that it's going to be a connection tool, bringing us back to humanity again, using brand new technologies and ideas, whether it's VR, 3D, AR technologies. But that's where I see it, right? Including blockchain as well, Web3. But maybe there's another tech that comes out that can do even better. Where it's going to go is up to everybody, but I see it as a connection tool because human beings, we're social creatures. We want to get back to to this, and I think that's the incredible part. So that's where I see it personally. Yeah, it's really hard to define because it's it's so new and it's being built every single day. So that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, does anyone else? Adam, what's your take on it?
Hey, can I ask a question to the audience? How many people have never heard of metaverse before? We're good. Okay. My definition's a little bit different. I've been making games for 32 years, and I look around at what the pandemic has done, not just to games, but to the music industry and the film industry, and we kind of came to the conclusion that, they all slowly died during the pandemic. And what I see the metaverse as is more of an opportunity for content creators to kind of break away from the original corporate models and find new ways direct to their audience and actually service a very specific niche that makes sense to them. But we also are looking at this convergence that kind of started with Fortnite and Roblox, where all these bigger companies who kind of floating through the death of the media industry are kind of looking at the space as an opportunity to get to young minds and continue the influence that they already have in the market in terms of marketing and just prowess. But you know, as a parent of 3 kids, you know, what do you do with your kids on the weekends? And it depends on which country you're in, but you know, kids are always connected. They're always online, and now it's become this really meaningful battle in the metaverse to keep out the corporate mindsets because the influence is so heavy, at least for us who are being the pirate radio of the space, and just make sure that content creators, from kids all the way up to, you know, anyone, content creators, chefs, whatever, have the chance to be heard. And at the end of the day, I'm a content creator, so I said, well, you know, I'm a chef in a kitchen, right? That's my goal. I'm here to make a nice meal. Maybe it's an experience everybody loves, maybe it's not. But you know, I'm not going to be the guy who blocks the kitchen and doesn't share the ingredients. So my approach to Web3 is to be open,
Right.
and you know, offer the community something that they haven't had before, which is access. You know, everybody has gates to their access. I think the metaverse is about closing those gates permanently and just keeping the doors open so we can actually connect with each other and collaborate versus be competitive. That's my vision for it.
Oh, that's great. I'll come to Nimrod, because you've raised a few questions I want to talk about there as well. You mentioned openness. We're getting definitions about it need to be shared space. Nimrod, because you're developing games, is that an essential part of this? What's your take on what the metaverse is?
I think that due to COVID, we've all started using virtual platforms, whether Zoom, Skype, etc. We, as VR creators, have had the opportunity to use other platforms, whether VR Chat, Rec Room, Verse, and many others. For us, this created an opportunity to meet in person in kind of an odd 3D form. So you could actually meet avatars, you could shake hands, you could almost do things you would do in a conference form. So it gave a bit of an extra entertainment and added value to the Zoom calls. You know, instead of just seeing a flat person, you could actually kind of feel they're there and you're there, and there's a sense of presence. From our perspective, from people who are creating storytelling in this new medium, we find that for us, there isn't a sense, it's not necessarily, if we use a term called the metaverse, it's almost like using the term internet to define how we connect. And we can connect in so many ways. Right. So for us, it's a natural form of communication through gaming and entertainment.
That's great, and that's a really good point. I think, you know, if you ask anyone here what they understand by the word internet, some people would think it's YouTube, and some people would think that it's, you know, all this. The interesting point about you said about communication, of course, is if we were having this meeting in the metaverse, there'd be no difference between the 4 of you and Jean-Philippe on screen. We'd all be here together. Steve, what's you coming at it from a slightly different angle? What's your definition, if you like, of what the metaverse is from your perspective?
Well, look, I think the jury is completely out still on this one, but for me, part of the premise is supposed to be also a single, unified, persistent digital identity, right? So that we have one identity and one that can potentially flow universally, and that you can have persistence also of things that you buy, so assets. I think there's a lot of challenges to get there, both in terms of trusting that to be safe going forward, but also, as of right now, there's so many companies that are running behind the metaverse and building their own things, and how we're gonna create interoperability between all of these things is still very, very much open at this point.
Absolutely. You mentioned a few things there we are definitely coming back to. The idea of interoperability, the idea of the one metaverse whereas open metaverse, security. We're going to come back to all of those things. But first I want to bring Jean-Philippe in as well. What's your take on what the metaverse is? And for instance, does it have to be an XR experience?
It's a great question. It's a little complicated. Suffice to say, I look at the metaverse as Internet 2.0. It's basically reimagining the World Wide Web in an XR context. So the greatest thing I always come back to is there's an episode of Futurama where they go into the internet and they dive into the VR headset and they digitize themselves and they go running around and they basically explore this like digital city landscape that is the virtual internet. And to me, that's actually the epitome of what the metaverse can and will be at some point in the future. Getting there, like, as already mentioned, is going to be, I think, a challenge, but what it ultimately is going to entail is a sort of a singular online persona represented in some kind of a unique avatar for every individual that's being represented in the virtual space. And the idea is that you would be basically hopping from virtual experience to virtual experience the same way that you hop from one website to another.
That's interesting. I mean, you've mentioned Futurama there, and of course, we've seen versions of those kind of shared universes in things like The Matrix and Ready Player One and Tron, and there's a lot there. I think the public perception of what an immersive world is kind of out there with the popular vision from science fiction. But what this little chat has shown is that everyone's kind of got a little bit of a take on what the metaverse is and what's going on there. You mentioned a whole different number of concepts. I mean, both Steve and Jean-Philippe mentioned persistence there as well. But there's now a metaverse standards forum, isn't there? Let's get into that a little bit about the attempts to define it. The likes of like Meta, Microsoft, Nvidia, big names, and also I think some people on the panel. Now I'll come to you next. But what are the implications of trying to set up standards for the metaverse? Is that a thing we need to do?
Boo.
Well, we're going to come to you next, Adam.
We're
right now,
going to have some fun. So the Standards Forum brought together like 700 companies around the world. From my end, it's exciting because so many companies, just finding them, who's doing metaverse stuff was a challenge. So, I mean, that was a nice thing. It brought a lot of people together. At the same time, there's so many different ideas. And we were just talking earlier, like there's no internet standards forum, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how this takes place. The nice thing is, though, I was at the meeting yesterday. They're trying to break down because there's a lot of varying opinions. Some people who are pro blockchain, others who are you don't need blockchain, and things all around it. Is metaverse VR? Is it AR? Is it XR? So it's going to be interesting to see how it all comes together. But specifically, interoperability is a big key for it. Is how do we get standards that allow us to connect and go from one metaverse experience to another, so jumping in between, and then on top of that, just openness and inclusive. But that's still going to be seen, and so where this goes, it's going to be interesting. My personal take on it is, we should let it grow the way it's going to grow, and kind of just have things in place to kind of protect. What I saw, and the reason why I got into this whole space, was I was seeing a lot of people in the NFT space selling virtual land that could never exist, doing it as a cash flip. And it hurt me to see so many millions of dollars in investors who lost so much money. And if we had just some simple standards that says, listen, is there an actual virtual experience? Can you go see the land that you're about to buy? If we just had something like that in place, it would have saved millions of dollars. And so, things like that, and even for, sexual harassment, I know we're going to get to that. But, like these sorts of things that keep people safe, let them do what they're going to do, but let's just keep everyone safe and let it grow the way it is. That's my personal opinion on it, though.
There's so many things in there. I mean, we're a partner at Sandbox, so I won't say that we're not part of the virtual LAN thing, but for me, that virtual LAN is just a server space that people are reserving, thinking that they're going to flip it for operating a game content somewhere down the road. I'm not saying I'm for that because I'm a content creator and I believe everything should be open. That's kind of weird, but I can see what people were going for when they were buying. Yeah. But I do think there's a lot of miscomprehension around interoperability and how we're going to get to that point and why that's a hot word for a lot of content creators. And for us as content creators, we don't care about the corporate standards. We don't care about filling Microsoft or Nvidia. I love you guys, by the way, I'm just saying. But we don't really care, no offense, about any of these old practices because it's not going to aid in the development of this process. And it's not about money, it's about time and interest. And the best way for us to move forward and create interoperability is to stop being so damn competitive. How many franchises are carbon copies of other franchises? And any Call of Duty players? I'm just saying, any Battlefield players? I'm just saying, they're all identical. For content creators, our goal is just to build a platform where assets can travel if they need to travel. And why? Why are we traveling the assets? These are questions we need to ask. And for kids who are playing Roblox, I guarantee you there'll be a time down the road where they're going to be running into Minecraft avatars. That's what the bigger companies are aiming at. They're like, oh, hey, yeah, we're going to build a playground for kids. And it keeps coming back to the kids. And a lot of the questions that we're not asking about the metaverse, and this one I think is really important, is what are the industries that are changing because of blockchain, and which ones are being influenced the most or have the need to change most? And I keep looping back to education, because depending on where you're at, the schools are horrible, and the kids are going online for most of their personal education. They're talking to friends, they're connecting on Fortnite, they're connecting on Roblox, they're connecting on Minecraft. They're not connecting at school as much as they used to. Kids are reading books. Surprise, kids read books. Are they going to meet in a virtual place and learn about another culture and build up more tolerance and acceptance for more societies around the world? I think so. And I think this is what we're trying to accomplish in this space is, I'm going to stop because I want to loop back to this, but one of the questions I was asked was, how do we protect our cultural identities in the metaverse? And I said, well, this is the best, first, and most unique position we've ever been in Web3, where we could make experiences about culture and everyone could experience it as a form of media and build that tolerance and build that understanding. Like, why are we trying to look at what we've already done, like reiterated over and over again for the past 20 years? So there's a lot of questions that are popping up in the metaverse. I think these are all really interesting topics. Yeah. But for me, the more corporate it gets, the more we're defeating the purpose of Web3 to begin with. And everybody remembers reading who's read Snow Crash?
Yeah, Neil Stevenson.
Like, that's a dystopian future. We're not going towards a dystopian future. That's fiction. We're already in the dystopian future. Yeah, right. A lot of people need to realize that. I mean, we are in the state we are in, and the content creators and the people who make things happen are constantly blocked from making progress. If you've ever worked with the university, if you ever worked in the medical field, you come up with a discovery inside and you're like, oh, hey, I made this big breakthrough. The university's like, oh, can we sell it? No, we can't sell it. It gets locked up and it's closed away. And the gatekeepers of society is why during the pandemic we all united with Clubhouse, why we all got together and had that space to chat. And everybody was there. Like, Clubhouse was amazing. And that wasn't even a virtual space. It was just an auditory space. Yeah. Now you see versions of Clubhouse popping up with these little virtual meeting rooms. And what are they doing? Everybody's playing ping pong and they're hitting beach balls. It's a classroom. It's people reconnecting with their creative side and the inner child. So again, like, what are we changing space-wise? What is our goal in this space? I'm here just to
we're still figuring it out.
Just to empower and free as many people as I can from having to work slave labor for big companies. No offense. Like, I've worked on 64 AAA titles in my career, and I'm just like, I could probably not use the stress going forward. If that makes sense. I'm not here to make a Big Mac for the world. I'm here to make a little experience.
That's great. That's good. Well, it's good to have difference of opinions here. I'm going to just bring in Jean-Philippe at this point before I come to you, Nimrod, because am I right in thinking that Jean-Philippe, Accelerator XR is also part of the Metaverse Standards Forum?
We are, actually. It's sort of ironic because before the standards report was even announced, we internally had been working on our own efforts to create an open standard for how to define the metaverse. And again, coming at it from that perspective, we're 100% about data interoperability and portability. So we had actually started working on our own spec to basically release a data portability standard for standard as it is, but we wanted to really like throw it out there and kind of create a more meaningful conversation that we can bring to everybody at the table. Part of it, once they announced the Metaverse Forum, I kind of chuckled a little bit because especially the fact that it's coming from like Meta and Microsoft and stuff like that. So I have an interesting opinion on it, but I think the heart's in the right place, even if the motives are probably not the right themes. But that being said, part of the reason why we joined so quickly is because it's okay. We already plan on doing this anyway, and if we can basically make sure that these corporate, entities, if we can basically put them in line, that's what we're going to do. Well, we want to basically make sure that we can all push forward an open and interoperable future that isn't being blocked by a parade of walled gardens that are all just trying to compete for themselves and make themselves look good by creating this, faux pas.
Here.
So we're there to basically shake it up.
Thank you. And I'm going to come, Nimrod, to you, because on that note, similar kind of conversation about metaverse standards. Am I right in thinking that the Canadian government are getting involved in the immersive space and trying to kind of spearhead some metaverse standardizations? I mean, I don't know whether you want to speak to that or just to the topic generally, but I know that was a thing that came up in conversation before.
I'll speak in general because I don't know much about what the Canadian government is doing. I know what the Israeli government, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I was just, in hearing what you said, I think that there is, in corporate wars, there are winners, and the winners are the content developers, because the corporates are investing so much money that needs to go for content to be developed, for it to show. If you look at streaming wars, there's $100 billion that was invested in the past 10 years or more through Apple, Disney, Hulu, Netflix, etc. That contributed. Whether that contributed and created valuable content, that's another question. And I would say, there is some shitty things out there. So I think there's advantages in these kind of corporate wars, and we should just make sure that it really benefits both humanity and cultures, and that it brings good quality changes, if you like, to how we use and consume this technology. With regards to your question, the one thing that I know that happened in Israel is that the government has decided to spend $5 million on creating Israel Roblox metaverse.
In Roblox?
In Roblox. I don't exactly know what that is. I don't necessarily think it's a wise thing, because their intention is to actually kind of educate people about that are more in the university level, and I don't think Roblox is the right platform for that. But I do think that it's good that governments are looking at ways of using this technology in various ways, and I hope they'll make more use of it and make more wise use of it, and I don't necessarily think it should be standardized.
That's a very good point about making wise use of it. The power we've got here. I'm going to come to Steve next, and then I'm going to come back to Nav. I'm going to just twist this conversation a little bit to talking about some of the dangers of the technology we're talking about here. The kind of, maybe dangerous is too strong a word, but certainly the challenges and the practical things that we have to be mindful of. You mentioned this at the start, Steve, but when it comes to the metaverse, there'll be challenges the same as there are on the internet, and in the real world. Hacking, the chances of being robbed in the virtual world. We're going to talk a little bit about harassment and so on, but your company is particularly interested. You're a cybersecurity guy. What are the dangers of the metaverse? What do we have to be mindful of when we're talking about all these standards and things?
Do you have 2 or 3 hours available for that?
Yeah.
I'll start perhaps with something that just to bounce on one of the comments that you made, in fairly rich comments, but was on culture. And before I go into security, I think one of my passionate topics as well is D&I. And what I like about Metaverse as well is it kind of brings an opportunity for a very basically diverse and inclusive world, because online there is no gender in theory, there is no color, there is no size, and etc., right? Although it's fair to say that there is still issues around potentially bullying and things of that nature that needs to be dealt with. And just to for the fun of it, I saw a comment on the internet that I thought was pretty spot on. That was from Mike Tyson saying, if people risked getting punched in the face for all the comments they made online, they'd probably be thinking twice before making them.
Right.
And I think that's kind of it. But going back perhaps more to security. So if you consider that you're basically going to have a digital life that is as valuable to you as the real world, whether that your house, your car, etc., then at that point, that means there needs to be measures in place to make sure that people cannot steal your identity, that they cannot steal any of the assets that you have. That means that you need to have trust that when money is drawn out of your account, that it's actually legitimate. For example, that the identity that's being used in the metaverse is one that can be trusted, and it can go quite deep, because if you think of, I was thinking the other day of an analogy, and if you think of all these potentially metaverses in practice, and people be given an opportunity to hop from one to the next, you probably need to think in equivalent term to countries today with passports and an ability every time you enter a world for the passport to be checked, and it's like, is this really the person that he says he is? And also having the ability to say, actually, that passport is invalid or banned. That person has been banned and shouldn't be let in again. And we can see already the challenges that exist today. If you go back to simpler terms of today, look at Call of Duty or Battlefield, and accounts banned, about 5 seconds later, the person that's created a new account is back online cheating. So there is a lot of challenges to ensure that you get to the point of trusting all of that, and trusting the identities, and trusting all of these things to be where people can actually put their lives at stake in practice.
Yeah, that's interesting. You raised an interesting point there, because the idea of identifying yourself online has been something that, for instance, the British government, one of the things they floated was the idea that everyone had to identify themselves online so that you couldn't hide behind an avatar. But that in itself creates danger for people, for instance, who are part of LGBTQ communities who don't want to reveal who they are online because they might be in danger from the Russian state or something like that. So there's a whole lot of balance there about the trust. On that note, though, about security, I'm going to come to you now, because you mentioned sexual harassment, and the more
that's a big one,
high fidelity the worlds become that we create, the more when we're talking about haptics or VR, all these things, the bullying that Steve mentioned and harassment, these become real dangers, don't they?
Yeah. How many here have kids? Yeah. Good. Yeah. And like Adam, I've got 3 as well. During COVID time, we're already so busy. Many parents had to also become teachers, as we're now having to do the teacher's duty, because they're not in class and they're kind of watching via Zoom, and it's like, did you do your homework? Were you in class? Were you sleeping on the bed? That sort of stuff happened. But at least I could see the iPad. I could see what they were doing. Now when you're going into technologies like VR, how are you able to see that stuff? How are we protecting people online? And you're hearing things like sexual harassment, and there's a lot of kids right now who are on these technologies, and so some people might take it as a joke, and it's not. It's actually, the more real it's getting, the more we have to take it seriously. I just saw another tech today, technology that was like VR glasses where you could feel it on your lips, with haptic feedback and so much more. Sexual harassment will become even more real, in these experiences than it was before. And so if you think that, just because your avatar's there and you're not getting touched, you will feel it in the future. And so one of the things that, I think will help is, in our technology, we're doing 1 meter sphere of protection against your avatar. But even still, there's other things that we need to put in place. I saw another company that has specialized audio tools using AI that can now detect kind of like, racial slurs or swearing and stuff like that. But what's happened in many of these metaverse experiences right now is, you go into things like, Horizon Worlds, or you go into things like, Allspace VR and others, VR chat. And there are a whole bunch of kids, and it's like their parents aren't there, and they're like swearing, they're yelling, they're saying the darndest things. But I think coming back to the whole idea of Mike Tyson getting punched out, it's like, you think twice beforehand. But many of these places have children, and it's many times it's our children who are going to be that future. And we need to put things in place and think about this and take it seriously, because it's going to be their technology. And that's the biggest key there, is it's going to be their tech. They're living in this already. And the ones who are doing that, what was that dance that they did? The floss.
The floss, yeah.
They're going to be parents and coming into this now in this next, 10 years. People are starting to come into now actually being grown adults and doing that. And how do we keep them safe in this coming future? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fascinating. It really is. And I mean, does anyone else want to chime in on that? What are your thoughts about how the metaverse will adapt with these things in mind, and how can we protect people online? Adam, yeah.
Can we just make games? I think the idea of these virtual spaces to meet up is fantastic, but Fortnite I keep going back to Fortnite. Fortnite has proven you can carry a pickaxe around and you can still get along with everyone. And the only thing you can do is teabag, and that's not the focus. I mean, you can ban people when you don't want to talk to them. I really think focusing on making good experiences that reward good behavior is the key. And if you're making something that's completely free, then you're going to increase the amount of misuse. So have those restrictions. I actually saw a really great example where it was a virtual version of Clubhouse, the prototype I saw, and if someone was harassing someone in the group, you'd see them actually have bubbles form around the people who have the filter turned on, and that person could no longer approach groups and get into audio range. And it automatically singles them out as someone that is probably abusing the system. And I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen in the future, is we're going to have audio that is very real to the real world. So if you're across the room, I won't be able to hear you anyways, because it's immersion
spatial
issues. So spatial audio. And then, hey, that dude just swore. And then the AI detects it, and you're like, hey, warning 1, you just got a barrier around you. Oh, warning 3, I can't talk to anyone right now until I cool off. Right. And I think that's built-in stuff that we could do easily. It doesn't really take that much effort, but be creative about it. And again, I'm very big on age gating. Please don't let 30-year-old people play with kids under 14. There's no reason to have it. Everybody's like, oh, maybe you just kidding about the numbers, the Call of Duty. I'm like, why is a 12-year-old playing Call of Duty to begin with? I'm sorry, I'm still pro age ratings, people. They're there for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't there an episode of Black Mirror where without using AR, they can blur people out in real life? They can just choose not to see somebody.
That would be great.
Does anyone else want to get in on this? Nimrod, do you have a take on the security implications, or I guess we're talking about the social implications, aren't we, of the way we need to behave online?
I guess in every society we've created laws to make sure we don't go into anarchy. Sometimes these laws are stupid and made by stupid politicians. Yes, I think people should be protected in every way. People should not be harassed. I think as a society we should be better. How do we enforce it? I have no idea.
I'll come to you next, Jean-Philippe, but just taking this on as well, you mentioned a couple of ideas here. Are we, with the metaverse as it grows, we're looking a little bit into the future now. This is a panel about kind of metaverse hype, at least, where people find that they are banned because of poor behavior in one metaverse, or their passport isn't valid, or maybe they don't have access to this technology because it's expensive to get a VR headset. Are we going to end up creating a second-class citizen who can't take part in the metaverse, where everything where you have to be because that's where business takes place? Or
no, but it's unavoidable, right? Just think of perhaps the older generation today that don't know how to use the internet, and how they're excluded from a lot of things that is available or should be available to them today. So I think sadly it's unavoidable.
Yeah. interesting.
You're forgetting kids also don't know how to use PCs.
That's true.
I have a young group that works with me in Japan, and I've had to teach the kids how to use PCs, which blows my mind. But again, like, why are we talking about VR?
Right.
Like, VR to me is not a part of the metaverse. VR is an option. It's a very personal option, and I think it's very limiting in terms of like group fun. And I think most of us just want to have fun in groups. I think that's societal norm. And yeah, there's some people who are living solo somewhere might get a headset, but I think we need to stop saying metaverse is VR.
Right.
That's just meta. The verse is fine without the meta, so we're good.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I want to go down that road a little bit, but because I have a question about Web3 and blockchain as well. I'm going to come to that in a second. When we'll, but before, Jean-Philippe, did you want to? I didn't give you a chance to comment on that. Did you have a kind of take on, particularly coming from an XR angle, about the need to protect people in the metaverse, or what that said, or social implications of the metaverse?
There's so many things. Gosh, yeah, I'd love to comment. I can talk ad nauseum about everything that everybody brought up. I think there's a couple key things that kind of pop up to me. The first is, I wholeheartedly agree that metaverse is not necessarily synonymous with VR itself.
Right.
And more specifically, XR as a construct is I think a much broader thing than even most people in XR even understand. Our view of XR is actually much more wide. We consider it as the combination of every computing device sort of imaginable. Everything from old school mainframe, systems to PCs to tablets to consoles to VR, AR, MR, the whole spectrum. And it's just a different way to plug in the same thing. So for me, the metaverse is actually, again, not essentially focused on like a virtual reality experience. It's actually, Clubhouse is actually just as much a part of it as the NR. It's how you connect, and the way you connect into each experience is going to change even throughout your day. So like the way I look at XR is actually, you wake up in the morning, you check your phone, and I'm already engaged in some kind of virtual experience through my tablet and my phone. And then maybe I pop on my computer and I do something on the computer that engages in the same community. And then I decide I'm going to put on my headset because I want something super immersive at that moment.
Right.
And it's going through that whole spectrum. And it's personal. You get to choose how you want to interact with that experience at that moment. But ultimately, it's multifaceted. It's multi-device. It's across the kind of the whole board. In terms of protecting it, I feel like we have to be very careful because on the one hand, Disneyland is great, but Disneyland also doesn't appeal to everybody. And people want to have a safe space, but they also want to have a space where they can mouth off and they can have a good time and they can still not be down in their own way for being themselves. Yeah. So I think what's going to be interesting is as we get more and more immersive, as you have a touch, sensory, capabilities, you're going to find that it's going to be possible to actually hit somebody in the virtual world, and hopefully that tempers their mood a little bit. So I think as we get more and more immersive, we might actually find that the social pressure to behave hopefully increases. It's just more of a theory of mine, but I think there's some aspects of that. And I think we already have social contracts that we engage in online. We have online identities that we've been working with for that are part of 30 years now, and that's a key thing where this is just an expansion of that. I mean, I was doing chat rooms on AOL when I was a kid. And we all misbehaved, but we also behaved too. There's decorum for it. I mean, we basically, my generation actually invented online speak, right, and the whole lingo and texting and all that stuff. I mean, we basically created that language to create the ethics behind it and the behavioral constraints behind it. Online bullying has grown in different ways, but there's also a counter to that. So I think there's going to be ways for us to improve, but I think naturally it's going to come with a territory as we get more and more immersive there's going to be, we're going to have protections built in, or that's just going to come in from the fact that the communities want to protect themselves inherently, and they will root out bad actors pretty quickly.
Yeah. Communities are often kind of self-policing. We're into the kind of final few minutes of this, so I'm just going to throw a conversation in there that could just obviously want to spend the rest of the day debating once we get out of here. Nav, do you have to have blockchain in your metaverse?
So this is a good conversation. I mean, this was going on all yesterday at the Metaverse Standards Forum too. So my opinion on it is blockchain is a beautiful technology, and it serves a great purpose. You can have metaverse, galaxies that don't use it. I mean, that's exactly where we've seen things like Roblox and so on. But it has a great use case as well. Being able to use something like MetaMask in your wallets, and then all your privacy and your data comes with you. It's your control. So I mean, that's the future of things, in my opinion. But at the same time, you can have metaverse galaxies, in my opinion, without it, and we're seeing that. So I'm in both worlds. We would not be where we are today with the metaverse if it wasn't for the blockchain community. That is, in my opinion, a very important fact that happened, including, yes, of course, Mark Zuckerberg going all in, but without the blockchain community, to say that metaverse would be where it is right now just would not be possible. So it's going to be important going forward. At the same time, we can have metaverse galaxies without it, in my opinion. And so we've seen that with Second Life. They did a very important thing. One of our teammates lived in Second Life for 12 years as a wedding planner, and made $40,000 US inside of there. I went to a nightclub there, and the whole DJing thing. So it was interesting, and this is the sort of stuff we're going to see as metaverse galaxies grow. People living new lives and enjoying in new ways that we've never experienced before. So that's what excites me. But where it goes with the blockchain community, it's really going to be up to those who are building the Web3, and I pass it on to Adam because I know he is.
Yeah. So I'm kind of on the same boat. I mean, we will support Web3 and blockchain in almost every product we're building, but we don't require NFTs. I think that's the word that a lot of people are looking for, is like, but do you need NFTs? We don't require them at all. And I do think NFTs are kind of a passing phase. I know people are like, no, they're not. I'm sorry, guys. I think they're 8 tracks, and we're going to get compact discs eventually, maybe record player. But I do think it's evolving, and I think that the ability to find ways to interact with the content is more important. But the idea behind MetaMask was transparency. It wasn't privacy, and I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. So we could totally tell what you have in your wallet. And a lot of people realize that, and the reason why those big purchasees are out there is because, oh, he totally owns that Bored Ape. Oh, he totally owns this. And so
the full ledger, basically.
Yeah.
Being able to see
so
the ledger.
Privacy is another thing. I think privacy in Web3 is a conversation to be had, and I think it's a topic no one talks about. But the question is, do we need it?
Yeah.
And is there anything that you guys are doing that you really don't want people to know? I mean, I play Hello Kitty. We're good. I'm not afraid of that. If you're proud of the stuff you're into, cool. If it gets a little bit more dark and in Las Vegas, maybe we need to have a Vegas server. But again, kids aren't going there, right? Our kids are not going there. This is my mindset. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think I'm going to come back to Nimrod. Do you have a take on blockchain and Web3 and NFTs? Are you looking into any of that in the development work you're doing, or what's your observation of it from outside? Do you think we need it?
Just before I dive into it, I think in listening to this conversation, I think metaverse is a linguist's issue, and it's less of it, because we've been, for the past 7 years, we've been developing virtual reality experiences, and every conference we went to, we were VR, AR, MR, and then XR, and then something else. And suddenly Mark Zuckerberg came with this thing, and it's called it a metaverse. So I think it's just a word that's evolving and trying to define certain technology. And that technology is widespread and cannot be defined by a single entity. And therefore, that it's confusing. That's what I'm trying to say. As for blockchain, we've looked into it. We haven't incorporated yet. We've developed certain ideas as to how to, but it's in a process. It's still not there yet.
So not essential to the metaverse right now, or certainly not to the work you're doing. Does anyone else want to chip in on that, on kind of on Web3? Steve, from a security perspective, what's your take on blockchain and NFTs?
Well, given where we are, I would actually think that we shouldn't certainly require it. That it's at this point, what's most important is freedom of innovation, and so we shouldn't be specifically having in mind a specific technology, but rather trying to solve the use cases and trying to create these worlds that are welcoming for everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jean-Philippe, you're part of the standards forum. You also obviously spoke a lot there very eloquently about VR. Is Web3 and the blockchain essential to the metaverse as well?
Short answer is yes. But for me, it's about ownership, right? So the fact is, right now, we all have online personas. Our data is split out and owned by related companies, whether it's Google or Apple or Microsoft, Facebook. Our data is out there, but it's not our own. You don't get to control it, and that's a problem. And so for me, the blockchain is a way to get the ownership back into the hands of the individual. You actually control your own data. You decide whether you're going to share that data with a particular metaverse galaxy or a particular virtual experience. That can only really be done when you're working in a blockchain sort of environment. So to me, that's the critical nature of it. You of course can have virtual experiences that don't have any recognition of that, continue to operate in their walled garden of siloed data that they collect and manage on their own. That's going to happen, and even within a blockchain-infused ecosystem, you're still going to have that private data collection going on. You're still going to have that kind of stuff happening, and that's just a given if companies want to gather their data. But in terms of your online identity, I see blockchain as a critical piece to recapturing back ownership of yourself online. We just don't, we don't have enough control right now, and there's no way for us to meaningfully get it back without actually having a direct handle on it. And blockchain is the key for that.
Right. I think that it's time for a couple of questions from the audience. We're into the final few minutes. It's coming up on 11 o'clock. We've got a packed schedule this morning. How about some questions from the audience for our panelists? We've got experts here. You've got one down the end. So if you hold on, please, sir, I'm going to run this. I've got a spare. I'm going to run this mic down to you. And then, the audience watching at home will be able to hear. Thank you.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Jesse. I work for Enthusiast Gaming. So we obviously work a lot in the metaverse, so to speak. I think we all agree we're not sure exactly what it is yet either. I'd be curious, I feel like I've been in metaverses my entire life, from Farmville to Star Wars Galaxies. I mean, I could go down we were laughing, Club Penguin was a metaverse at some point. How is that different from what we're seeing today? And I guess from a brand perspective, a lot of what we do is really recreation in a lot of these games. How do you see that developing and brands developing in general in the metaverse as it evolves as well?
Have you been reading my blog?
And if you want to take this, please leap in and answer.
You guys, yeah, okay, good. I'd say the differences now that are going to start happening is we're going to start seeing more human-like interactions. I mean, inside of those games, you're still playing a game. In these cases now, you're going to start getting into more use cases of you go see your doctor inside of one of these experiences, and you get to see maybe your family members and stuff, and experience, more human-like things from a gaming style of experience or not. I mean, it really depends on how the technology goes, but we're still inventing it. And yes, those experiences were similar. I mean, you had a lot of good things that came out of it, but then at the same time, I would say their focus was different. Like, you go into Fortnite, wonderful, you get to meet a lot of people, but your goal is to shoot someone dead, and that's a thing. Whereas in my opinion, the future metaverse is going to be more about these sorts of things, like human interactions. And that's where we're seeing, brands and companies start coming in and saying, how can I use this for sales? And for example, some of the clients that we're working with, your contact form. Click on a contact form and now load an entire experience, and you can have a salesperson who gets that, message that someone's in the experience, go in, and now you can actually speak to someone live with VR glasses and that whole experience and get to a sale, right? Like a real human stuff that we are doing. Or, later, like, these conferences, or even, just a wedding, just having fun. So I'd say that's where the difference lies, but that's my opinion on it. Thoughts?
I think you're going to see more content creators being empowered, more importantly. And I think, everybody's talking about metaverse standard forums, and I think that's cool. Not really. But I do think we should have a content creator standard. And a lot of content creators, when I say content creator, I go everywhere from artists to, music makers to filmmakers to people who create technology, who create medicine. Like, there's a broad spectrum here. And I think the whole point of the metaverse is to empower that. Well, I won't say metaverse, I'll say blockchain in general and Web3. But we need to be able to have like you mentioned, the ability to innovate without all these restrictions that are put in place by people who benefit from them. And right now, there's a lot of negative happening in the space as well. There's a lot of crime happening in Web3 because there's no jurisdiction for it. So I think our responsibility is to make sure that what we're doing in Web3 is meaningful. And for content creators, anybody in the room who's a content creator who wants to use Web3 and wants to find their way out of working under a thumb of somebody, hit me up. I'm here to try to figure out how to empower you. That's it.
I'm gonna leap in there because I can see from the clock that we are out of time. Thank you for your question. I'm going to say, if you have questions for our panelists, and I know it can be intimidating to speak up in a room like this and ask what's on your mind. There's lots to debate here. I guess folk can find you on Meet to Match, or maybe LinkedIn or something like this. There's
Starcaster hashtag 9139. If anyone wants to find me,
you guys can just come say hello to me. I'll say hello. No problem.
So I will. So please do thank these folk around the conference or in the Meet to Match platform. But let's wrap it up there. A round of applause for Nimrod, Nav, Adam, Steve, and Jean-Philippe on screen. Thank you very much for your time. And we'll have to move along. We've got a couple more talks this morning. But thank you very much for being part of it. Thank you, everyone.